Hi, everyone. It's Denise Brown, and welcome to Caregiver Support Live. We're going to gather on the first Friday of every month at 2 p.m. Eastern Time to brainstorm suggestions and solutions for your caregiving conundrums. My co-host Jennifer is under the weather, so we wish her a speedy recovery, and you'll meet her next month. So I'm grateful to those who have joined me live. And we're going to get started. So I'm going to share a question that a family caregiver posed to me before the holidays, and then we're going to talk out our answers. And I think we might be able to tackle two questions today. So here we go. I'm going to read the question because I want it to be correct. I don't want to just off the cuff say what happened. Although off the cuff, I'm going to say what happened. I I was working and my phone rang and I picked it up and it was a family caregiver. And he was calling for some suggestions. And here's what he told me. He's caring for his wife. His wife is receiving hospice benefits. His wife has dementia. She has been keeping him up all night. He's exhausted. His latest blood work from the doctor indicates that his stress is really causing health problems for him. They live in assisted living together. And he's wondering, what can he do? So the big thing for me was the fact that she's on hospice services. So I suggested he reach out to the hospice team and ask about the 5-day respite service that he can use. It's a benefit that's part of hospice. And when I was talking to him, I thought, now, is there a cap on how many 5-day breaks you can get? So I did a little research in anticipation for today. And here's what Medicare says, which is very loosey-goosey. You can get a respite care break more than once, but it's only on an occasional basis, and Medicare does not define occasional. Medicare guidelines allow for more than one respite occurrence, with each period lasting no more than 5 days in a row. Here's the other piece about this benefit available through hospice. It occurs in a facility. It's not like a team comes into the house and stays with you and your caree and you get a break. Your caree goes to a facility. It could be a facility that's run by the hospice organization. It could be a facility that's contracted with the hospice organization to provide the 5-day respite. As I was thinking through a little bit more about this question, which is a great question, it also reminded me of how important it is for us to look at hospice as a provider that we pick. And as we're looking at the right hospice provider for our situations, we can ask a question about which facilities do they use if, for instance, I needed a 5-day respite break. It would be important to know that. I would want to be comfortable with the facilities they use. I'd want to know about them in case I needed to use the facility. Just a good reminder that oftentimes we wait to think about hospice services, and it's much better to be proactive, even if you're too soon. If you're too soon, you just realize, oh, we're too soon. That's great. And if you're too soon for hospice, it might be that you're right on time for palliative care. And it could be that the hospice provider also offers palliative care services. You can start with palliative care and then transition into hospice when it's appropriate. We did that with my parents. I was proactive with my mom, who was so angry with me about this piece of proactivity on my part, but I didn't want to get caught off guard. When we started thinking about whether or not she was ready for hospice, she wasn't. We started with palliative care, and it was the best thing we did. I was just thinking about this actually before we got together. My mom was fiercely independent and liked to do things herself, just like the rest of us. And one of the things that got harder for her was lifting her arms to actually shampoo her hair. And I would say, Mom, I can help you with that. I'm happy to help you with that. No, 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 no. Once we started palliative care, though, the palliative care nurse practitioner did a full body assessment of my mom and said, oh, it looks like you have a little dandruff. What can we do about it? And then my mom said, well, I need help in the shower. And then my dad said, well, why aren't we helping her in the shower? And my mom said, because I won't let Denise. And then she was able to let me actually help her. So we took care of that. And then actually, I'll just go one step further. Once I was able to actually help her in the shower, I was able to help her with some scalp treatments with essential oils. And so I would give her a really nice essential oil treatment. When her hair was damp, I would put some essential oils. We would wrap her hair in a towel and she would relax and it felt good. Okay, so that was a long story about being proactive, about choosing a hospice provider and asking, who is your respite care provider? Which facility is used? You'd want to know that. One of the other things that this family caregiver said when he reached out to me was, I'm thinking about placement for my wife in a memory care unit. And I suggested he first use the 5-day respite break to better understand what he really needs. For instance, maybe he just needed a 5-day break and then she could return home and he'll feel okay. Maybe 5 days wasn't enough and it was time to think about moving her to memory care. And he was very open to that and had already started to do some research around which facility. He found one nearby and he was considering it. I think we often worry about jumping the gun and making a permanent decision that we later regret. If he starts with a 5-day respite break, it will help him better understand what's the next step, return home or move to a memory care facility. I'm curious if anybody who's joined us live has used that 5-day respite break for Carrie. Okay, Jenny, go for it. What was it like? When did you use it?
Well, I've used it twice. I used it with my grandmother. We used it because she was getting to a point where she could not be left alone, and that was our way of getting her out of the house. She fought us very much. She did not want to be out of her home, so we explained to her that we had to move her out of the home so we could set the home up for her to, and it was wonderful. The first few times we actually did bring her back and forth. She was in respite for 3 days. We used it for 3 days. The secondary time, we got the home set up better, gave everybody a break. The second time she went back and she was there for 5 days and she actually passed away on the 5th day. So that was a little confusing. I'm sorry. But we had, so the first time we used the respite was 3 days to get her out of the home and to give us a break and we could get the home reevaluated. And then she was home probably 3 weeks. And then it was just too much for my mom. We were trying to figure out what to do. We did not have the family support. So we were going to have to find a location, but even for us to find her a new location, we needed help. So she went into the hospital and then she passed away on the 5th day of respite. And something we did learn, and this is just my past experience with working with Medicare, they can push the respite sometimes to 6 or 7 days if they have to, but it gets a little tricky. That I've been told that by multiple nurses. And then my mom's end of life plan was she did not want to pass away at home, and she was with hospice. And so we started when she was towards her end of life. They used the 5-day respite to move her to the facility for her end of life. And I recommend that highly. That was very nice for us because we stopped being caregivers then and we were just a grieving family. And that was very positive.
We did that with oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
And in different experiences, same hospice, but there was 2 years apart. So the first time my grandmother went to a hospital, and the second my mother went to their hospice home. So it was really interesting to see how they were treated differently.
We did the same with my aunt, and I was thinking about that today too. She didn't want to die at home. And when the hospice team was clear that she was entering the last few days, she was transferred to a hospice unit that was in a hospital. It was just operated and staffed by the hospice team. And I like how thoughtful you were about using that 5-day respite break. thinking through, in essence, let's clear up some of the chaos that's going on by getting rest and thinking about how the house is set up. And what do we need in order to feel successful in managing this at home? That's a really good idea.
It helped us give us some clarity. That was when that was like kind of my first round of being a caregiver, was with my grandparents, and those were the scrape knee days, where you're just learning one step at a time. We were very fortunate to have palliative care that kind of walked us through it into the hospice process. So,
And as you think about interviewing hospice providers, I think that's really important to do. You can ask not only about the facility, but ask for some examples of how families have used that 5-day respite break in the past and when they might recommend it for your particular situation.
it's a very good question.
And it's helpful to ask before. It's something that has to be organized, right? There has to be a bed available.
And the other thing is transportation.
Yes, yes.
That was a big issue for us. My mom's midlife issue time was that it was Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. Well, we couldn't transfer her. We needed an ambulance. Well, Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, pretty busy time for ambulances if you think about it. So those are things that I would have thought out differently. Obviously, the timing was not something we scheduled, but if you can plan it, Tuesday morning for ambulances are probably a much smoother time to transfer versus a Friday afternoon.
Yeah, so I guess it's thinking about what are our own triggers that would indicate we need a break, or we need to regroup, or we need to think through where care is going to take place, if it's going to continue at home or if we're going to look at it for placement. End of life care is really tough. And I think there's a misconception about how much care and help hospice offers. It's not much. It's helpful.
No, it is helpful, but I was very misled. I thought for sure once we went to hospice, there'd be somebody there 24 hours. Yeah.
You get a visit every week with a nurse, and then depending on availability and what the care plan indicates, you might have a home health aide 2 or 3 times a week. In my mom's situation, we only had a home health aide once a week. It just depends. And we know there's a shortage of direct care workers. So the shortage could determine how often a home health aide actually comes. End of life care is pretty intense with a lot of physical hands-on care. And it's also requiring diligence about administering the pain meds. Every 4 hours, someone might have to be there to administer pain meds, including overnight. And it's thinking through how many people do we have to help? What's their availability? How can we make this help happen?
So I think the gentleman, when he called you asking for help, I think that was a wonderful idea, the respite care. I don't know, other than bringing in family and people to help him, I'm not sure what else I could be able to recommend other than.
Yeah. And again, it's just testing out whether or not it's a short break that could be helpful, or it really is time to think about having her in a memory care unit where she has more intense help and staffing so that he can sleep at night and take care of his own health. Okay, should we go to the next question?
Denise, before you move on,
Yes, go for it.
here in California, or at least in the Southern California, we don't really have the hospice homes that you can go to. It's in your home or if they're in a assisted living or something. But I became aware of it that other parts of the country do have that. So that's different. Secondly, I had never heard of the respite that you're talking about through hospice. And I've known several people, or a number of people whose family members were on hospice. But the one time that we did hear of anything, the facility that the that was used, you had to go for at least 7 days. Now, whether that, because that was their requirement, they were then able to work it through with Medicare, but they would not take anyone for less than 7 days for that respite. But
Okay.
it is something to, like you say, to think about ahead of time. But the other thing is, and every state or everybody, every year you get that big Social Security Medicare book. On the back of it, they have an organization in every state that here they call it the Center for Healthcare Rights. But they are required, that every state is required to have some agency that can help you answer questions. And they are there to be able to say, now that you heard of that, they can help to find out what in your state you may have where Medicare will come in or give you answers, aside from calling Medicare itself.
Okay, and it's important to note that Medicare is a federally funded benefit, and the benefit stays the same regardless of where you live. It's just sometimes hospice providers might implement Medicare guidelines and rules a little differently.
Yeah.
It's always a little loosey-goosey.
Yeah, but they're there for all Medicare questions, especially if you have something that you see on your statement of benefits that's different than what, say, the bill that the doctor is sending you. And they're the ones that you can call, and they'll help you walk through it. In some cases, it's that the doctor's office needs to rewrite what they did or something, but they can help you with those kind of questions.
And I just want to mention the facility you were referring to that provided respite care for hospice patients. They had a 7-day admission requirement. Facilities that take short-term stays might have a requirement like that. Oftentimes it's because of the paperwork. If hospice uses a facility that requires 7 days, you'd want to be clear about that last 2 days. Who is paying for that? Because you don't want to be surprised by a bill because Medicare is only going to pay for 5 days. It's part of how you interview the hospice provider to find out about facilities they use for that 5-day respite break. And then what are the little details that you might not think about, but are important to know? Facilities, what are the facility guidelines? If it's a longer stay, who's going to pay for day 6, 7, 8, whatever it might be?
Another thing
Okay.
you want to
Oh,
focus is making sure you know how your carry is going to be transferred. Like I said, the ambulances and stuff like that. Who's covering that when you're looking through your insurance? Make sure you're using ambulance companies and transportation companies that are covered with Medicare or have contracted. We've run into hiccups around that in the past too.
lots of hiccups with ambulances.
Oh, ambulance from my previous world are very challenging.
Yes. And it's helpful when you have a good hospice team that is on top of all these logistics. And again, it can feel like, we'll wait. And what I mean is, we'll wait before we use the respite break. We'll wait. We can do it. We can do it. It's really helpful to pay attention to what's the reality of the situation. And rather than waiting until the last minute where you think, okay, I'm in my moment where I'm breaking, I can't do this anymore. Let's take advantage of our 5-day respite break. That's going to add more chaos to your situation. You want to make sure you're paying attention to how things are going and then thinking through, well, if we use that 5-day break, I think things will be a little better for us. Let's do it. Okay, let's go to our second question. Okay, so I actually saw this question in an advice column and I thought it was very interesting. So here it is. I have 3 siblings. I live closest to our mother, who's 84 and homebound. My siblings live out of state, so I manage all of her care. My siblings seem grateful that I've got our mother covered with good care, but there's little communication with me or compassion for the time I devote to our mother's growing needs. I wish I could teach them to care more. I rarely hear from them, and sadly, neither does my mother. How can I motivate my siblings? Okay, a couple thoughts, and then we'll open it up. As family caregivers, we have this great gift of reading minds. And I think about it as reading needs. We can read the needs of others who are around us and step in and help. Others don't have that gift and talent. The siblings who are out of state might see the sibling who's the family caregiver as being on top of everything, not stressed, not needing help. Everything is fine, because they don't see anything other than that. They can't read the family caregiver's mind. So I guess my first suggestion, if that family caregiver hasn't already done that, is to express the reality of the situation. It is getting harder for me. I'm getting more stressed. Mom needs more care. I'd like to have a family meeting to talk out the reality. During the family meeting, everyone hears the reality. Before the family meeting, the family caregiver can think through, what do I need more help with? What would I like my siblings to do? And then thinking through the strengths of each sibling. If there's a sibling who likes to manage money, they can take over bill paying. If there's a sibling that really likes to communicate and send texts and cards, that's the sibling who keeps in touch with their mom regularly, sending texts, sending cards. If there's another sibling that likes to do research, that sibling can research what additional programs might be available. If there's a sibling that would agree to it, perhaps there's another one who could come, stay with their mom while the primary family caregiver gets a break. And it could just be the first break is at afternoon. The out-of-town sibling stays with their mom. The family caregiver enjoys a little bit of a break, and that out-of-town sibling gets used to the schedule and the routines. If something happens to that primary family caregiver, whether it just be a case of the flu or they test positive for COVID, someone's going to have to step in to help out. And it's helpful if those out-of-town siblings have an idea of what's required so they can step in. Of course, it could be that these out-of-town siblings have chosen not to be involved or to know, and that's harder. I'm not sure we can actually teach someone how to care more, but I think we can inform others of the impact of their involvement. It's our mom feels so much better when she hears from you. When's a good day every week for you to call and check in? It means so much to her. I think sometimes we just tell a story in our head that, if they needed me, they'd reach out. If she missed me, she would reach out. Where we're telling our stories in our head of, if they really were concerned, they would reach out and find out. If they really cared, they'd reach out and find out. So it's important to start the conversations. And I think we get exhausted as family caregivers in leading this. Again, as family caregivers, we have a unique gift, which means we get it. Others don't have that gift, and they're not going to get it, and they need to actually be informed, not lectured, not actually dictated to, informed, and then presented with an opportunity to get involved because it means that much to our mom. Our mom loves to hear from you. Our mom misses you. And then go from there. Again, before a family meeting, be clear about what you want your siblings help with. Present it as opportunities. We sometimes worry we're burdening people. It's not a burden, it's an opportunity for them to make an impact at someone's end of life. It's an important role to play. And as the primary family caregiver, you could figure out what actually is the time they invest in this new role they play. And they might say, I've only got an hour on Saturdays. Great, take it. Take the hour on Saturdays. And that's when they call your mom, or that's when they do research, or that's when they pay the bills. Okay, what else would you add?
I would add with the family meeting, if possible, maybe through the senior center in your area, that person's area, or other program that's there for caregivers, to see if there is an impartial person who can do the meeting for them. Here we have the caregiver resource centers, and for the clients, they are able to help them find a social worker or one of the family consultants that will come and do the family meeting, and have found in many cases that that helped because it kept a little friction down that might have otherwise come up. And like I said, sometimes through the senior centers, they have at least here they're called case managers. And some of them are licensed clinical social workers who are able to, they will do that for the family. And so that sometimes can make a difference. And sometimes too, when you were sharing about, being specific about what you need, in one of our classes, we suggested to a lady who said her brother never helped. And she suggested, we asked, well, what does he do? And he was an accountant, but he was out of the area. So we suggested, why don't you talk to him? And when we saw her again years later, she said her brother, not only did he take over the financial role, but he broke down crying because he said he wanted to be involved, but nobody told him anything that he could do because he didn't live in the area. And he said it made such a difference for her as well as for the brother.
I think of a situation I encountered years ago. I used to do an advice column for our local paper, and then I would put it up on my website. And one of the questions someone wrote in to me was, I'm caring for my mom. She's living in my home. She's in our extra bedroom on the second floor, and my brother will stop by every week, and he will come into our house and stand in the foyer and shuffle his feet and ask, how's mom? And the family caregiver who wrote me said, it's driving me nuts that he only stands in the foyer. What is wrong with him? And it's very similar to what you just described. He didn't know how to go up and be with his mom. It seems so logical that if you're stopping to see how your mom is, you're going to stop in and actually say hello and visit with her. He was just struggling with, I don't know how to be with my mom in this way. So I suggested to the family caregiver that when her brother shows up, because he's showing up for her, he just doesn't know what to do next. When he shows up, give him a big hug, take his hand, go upstairs and say, Mom, Bill is here. And then have a seat ready for Bill. Have Bill sit next to mom, put mom's hand in Bill's hand, and then just have a conversation. Sometimes we just don't know how. We're showing up, but we just don't know how. And it's important that there are signals for us as the family caregiver to pay attention to for that teaching opportunity to teach someone how. What am I missing, Jenny?
Nothing. I'm just having. I think you're nailing it. It's all the communication piece. I think the most just recently, losing my mom just recently, and there was three of us, and I was the primary caregiver, and my sister lived 5 miles from me, and everything that she did, I had to pull her along to do. I'm like, I need you to do this. And afterwards, my brother made a comment to me. He goes, "Well, this is what you love to do," and my husband was standing behind him, and the look of shock on his face must have mirrored the look of shock on mine. I've never really signed up to be the caregiver. But he's like, but this is your role in the family. And I was so taken back by that. And maybe part of my issue was I didn't communicate enough that this wasn't something I wanted to take on. I did it because that's my personality and that's who we are, because I read minds, as you said. But I think you nailed it. We just really have to communicate well. And he's like, I didn't realize that until after we were having this very honest conversation. That he's like, I just assumed that this is what you wanted to do. And
And
my
that
background, because of my background too. No, really didn't sign up to do this. Was not on the agenda to give up all this time.
right, I think people don't necessarily understand the impact of the stress
Right.
and the sacrifices that we struggle with. And it might be because we're not talking to them about the stress and the struggles.
And I think that was, in all fairness to my brother, he just didn't realize it. Well, you did it so well and you just handled it so well. Well, my brother only saw snapshots of it. So there's that. So I think the communication piece that both of you are speaking about, and I'm going to look here because I would love to have caseworkers that would help facilitate those conversations with families, because I think that is so, would be so helpful. Because I think that a lot of times why I didn't have conversations with my family is you don't know how to communicate, and to have
In our,
somebody who's there.
yeah, in our consultant training, we teach that as
Yeah.
well. And in many situations, I think the family caregiver would do well by role playing prior to a family meeting.
Absolutely.
In my situation, if I were to invite a stranger to have a family meeting, my siblings would be like, what? This is private. We're just going to talk about it with us. We don't need anybody from the outside. However, if I could role play how the conversation would go and how I wanted to facilitate the conversation with a consultant or coach before, that could be really helpful.
I agree. I think so. I think it'd be so helpful. So that's really lovely to know about. But it's very challenging for me. It was for not challenging for me, I should say, I misspoke, but it was very eye-opening for me to hear my siblings' perception of this whole event versus my perception of this whole event. And even like my niece and nephew, like my niece got it completely. She's like, well, you did everything. Nobody was helping you. They saw it. So it was this really interesting dynamic. So I think you nailed it. The communication is so crucial.
One thing I would think when I was in the midst of something awful, I would think I'm not going through this by myself. And I would call my brother and my sister and we would have a conference call. And I thought, I don't care if they don't want to hear it. I didn't want to experience it. So I'm in the middle of it. They have the distance. They weren't actually in the middle of it, but they had to hear about it from me. And I regularly would just say, you got to hear this. And sometimes I knew my sister was too stressed out to hear it. My brother, I probably really stressed him out, but he always would listen calmly. He always picked up the phone when I called. And that was really helpful to me.
That is lovely to have.
You know, sometimes I think if you don't feel like you're being taken for granted, you might be, it might not be as stressful, you know, but that's not just in the caregiving, but in general, even in a job situation, you know, when you feel you're being taken advantage of, it's a lot harder to be receptive to that extra workload.
It sure is. And it's a lot harder to be gracious. It's a lot harder to be composed. It just makes everything hard when you feel like somehow I've become the family's doormat.
Yeah.
How did this happen? One other thing too, and it made me think of this when you were sharing, Jenny. I think if we do it all without giving others in our life the opportunity to help by making specific requests, be open for them to do it in a way that's different from us, we actually help them prevent regrets. At the end of life, there is no turning back. When our Carrie is gone, there is no other opportunity to help. And even if a sibling says, I decline, I'm not going to help, at least you know they have to live with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
If, as you were talking about with the brother who wasn't aware that he could help because he wasn't living nearby, if there's an opportunity to help, it could be that others want to because they don't want to have that regret later. We had a sister who just refused to help and said, I'm not helping you. She was flat out clear. She was not going to help. She wasn't going to communicate with us. And we just moved on, knowing that she had to live with that. That was a decision that was going to really,
That was on her.
yeah, absolutely. We were at peace about that. We did everything we could. We were at peace about it. If there's someone that could help and just doesn't know how, it's so awesome to create an opportunity for them to feel successful in helping.
I agree.
Okay. This was Caregiver Support Live. This was fun. Thanks, you
I
guys.
really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks you guys so much for joining. This was fun.
And Denise, we can share this with others?
Yes, I'll post the recording and it'll be available on my YouTube channel. And I'll share the link in an email once it's posted.
And then how do we invite others to come, like for the next, because you said it's once a month, right?
Yes, and you can invite others to join us through Eventbrite.
Isn't that right?
Oh,
I have scheduled out 2024 on Eventbrite.
no, Eventbrite is kind of hard sometimes. I had to go through hoops to get on.
You did?
Yes,
Oh,
I had
wow.
to. I registered, and then when I went to go for the link, because one of the things about Eventbrite, they want a password, but every time you go, it may be different. And so then they had the part that says, send me the link. So then I had to choose that for them to send me a link to then come on.
So
And
the
yeah, my
other,
women's group is they're trying to find something other than Eventbrite for that very reason.
and the other way you can join us is by joining our community, which is caringourway.com, because it's an event in our community as well. You can register through our community, and then you can watch the archive, which will be posted in our community as well. So it's caringourway.com.
I'd like to share that with the people who come I facilitate a second support group now.
Oh, good for you.
And I would like to share that because that one meets twice a month, the other one only once a month, and people are looking for additional times, and especially if it's virtual. A lot of them are having difficulty being able to go in person because they have no one to watch their loved one.
Yeah. So many challenges, so
Yeah.
many challenges. And I also think we should take a moment to express our gratitude for all who are in a caregiving and after caregiving situation.
Yes.
Thank you for all you do. We know how much you do. We appreciate all you do. And thank you for watching. And feel free to join us on the first Friday of every month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Caregiver Support Live, where we have the collective wisdom to offer solutions and suggestions for your experience.
Really quickly, may I ask if somebody wants to submit a question?
Oh, yes.
And
Okay.
that would
Yes.
be helpful to have. How would you like somebody to submit questions? I apologize. I didn't mean to.
Oh, no, I was supposed to do this before we started today, and I got so distracted by something else. You can post a question on caringourway.com, and I'll also include an email address that you can send questions to,
Perfect.
because
That
we'd
would- I'd like to share.
love, yeah, we'd love to hear your questions. We are here to help and support you.
That's great. That's awesome.
Okay, thank you,
Thank so
Jenny.
much.
Yeah.
No worries. Have a great
Oh,
day, guys.
yeah, thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.